floating platform right next to it for dirigibles. In the 20s, they thought blimps were going to be all the new rage of transportation of the future. But then, the humanity. That was right around the time of the Hindenburg disaster. And this scared everyone from riding in blimps. No one ever landed one up there. Bad timing. If you pass by Magnificent Mile, you might pass by the Intercontinental Hotel. It has lion decorations in the front and the Michael Jordan Steakhouse downstairs. Continuing, down low on the right, up ahead, you can see a clear glass building with a suspiciously iPad-shaped roof. I wonder what store that is. It's the Apple store, yeah. I think they have to upgrade that roof every time a new iPhone comes out. Now, they had to bring those glass windows in, especially made from Italy, and one of them broke on the way in and somebody lost their job, but they sorted it all out. Continuing up ahead on the right, you see a white clock tower. That is the Wrigley Building, as in Wrigley Field and Wrigley Gum, same guy. Wrigley was built in 1921 and 1924 in two sections, because there used to be a train line running through the middle of it. The base of that clock is 2 stories tall. Its minute hand is a little longer than the wooden benches that you are sitting on right now. The tower itself was inspired by a Spanish cathedral called La Giralda, which is in Seville, Spain, in the beginning of Chicago's history. The architects here didn't really have their own styles just yet, so they were copying the European styles. That's what was popular back then, so they called this the Spanish Revival style of architecture. Straight ahead of us is our second tallest building in the city, the Trump International Hotel and Tower, designed by Adrian Smith and built in 2009. This style is called contextualism because it matches and flatters its context. Its neighbors, often with mirrored glass windows. Its first terrace is 16 floors, the same height as the rooftop of the Wrigley, intentionally matching. Its second terrace is the same height as the thin white tower across the river. And its third terrace is the same height as its next door neighbor that we're just starting to see, that little black box building right next to it. That's the AMA Plaza. You'll see some of Trump Tower's lower floors are wavy, like the waves of the river, more contextualism. This architect, Adrian Smith, is from Chicago. Smith also designed the current tallest building in the world, which is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which looks similar to this, but it has more layers and it's almost twice as tall. Now, up to your left, you'll see a dome on a tower on the Jewelers Building. You see those corner temples? You might see those in some movies, too, like Batman Begins, where Batman's standing up there on top of one of those and looking down to the city below with dramatic music. The Jewelers Building was originally designed for the jewelers with a car elevator so that they could drive straight in and get lifted up to the front door and not have to walk through the dark, scary parking lot where the mafia might be lurking, ready to steal all those expensive jewels in the 20s when this was made. Now, back up to our right are everybody's favorite giant twin corn-cob towers, Marina City. Marina City was designed by Bertrand Goldberg in the 60s. His idea was to bring people to come live downtown. Back in his day, nobody lived downtown here. There was nothing to do, just work. So Goldberg had this idea to create a self-sustaining complex with its own laundromat, grocery stores, retail shops, bowling alleys, cinema, restaurants, and more. They even got their own marina downstairs where the residents can keep their boats safely year-round. And you'll see 18 floors of parking spaces, which are valet only. And you can see why. There is no wall there. You have to be trained to park there. Just a little thin post and a little wire. And some of those spots hang out over the river a little bit too. So you might be looking at those parking spots up there thinking to yourself, has anybody ever just driven a car into the river from up there? And the answer is yes, they have, because this is America. Twice. Once was for a movie called The Hunter with Steve McQueen, and the other time was for a car insurance commercial. It must have been quite the policy on that one. To the left, you'll see a beautiful Greek temple on top of a tall modern glass tower. This is 77 West Wacker, a nice example of the neoclassical style, which is a fusion of the new and the old together in perfect harmony. You can see the modern glass windows framed by Portuguese royal white granite, making it look almost as if you're seeing through the building to the other side, especially when the clouds line up. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful illusion. 77 was designed by a Spanish architect named Ricardo Bofill from Barcelona and built in 1992. And it's definitely one of my favorites. Back to the right, you'll see a red brick building, carefully in town. It's got 6 bays of windows east of the clock tower, but only 5 sections west of the clock tower, and that's because they had to come in and destroy a section of this building in the 20s to make space for the expansion of LaSalle Street. Because in the 20s, Chicago was growing rapidly. They needed that space. I'm sure the architects were not happy about that change, but they did patch it up nicely. Nowadays, they have inside of here the headquarters of Encyclopedia Britannica. Is anybody over 30 remember Encyclopedia Britannica? Okay, good. I see some hands. It was a good set of books. I think it's all online now. Continuing up on the right is another tall glass tower called 300 North LaSalle. My favorite feature of this building is that lovely little steakhouse they have downstairs called Chicago Cut. I go there to celebrate leisure life events, like 5 years working at Shoreline Sightseeing. We're going to celebrate number 500th state. Right next to it, you'll see the Lee Curtis building with a three-part design and large windows. This is called First Chicago School of Architecture style, where the architects here started gradually moving away from the European styles and began creating their own unique styles and coming of age over 100 years ago. Continuing on the right is this big wide merchandise mart, filling in the Art Deco style. Art Deco always has deep inset windows, vertical racing stripes, polished Indiana limestone, and repetitive geometric shapes. The merchandise mart also has these 8 busts in the front that look like giant Pez dispensers. Those are portraits of the 8 merchant princes of Chicago. These were all wealthy businessmen that helped the city grow many years ago, installed by the Kennedy family who owned the building for 50 years. Merchandise Mart occupies 2 city blocks. It has 7.5 miles or 10 kilometers of hallways inside. They're full of office spaces and showroom floors. They also have restaurants, shops, boutiques, a train station, and a train station. And they used to have their own zip code for years until Chicago told them they had to share with the neighbors. Now, we are entering Wolf Point, which is the Y-shaped confluence of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. This is where it all started, years ago with the settlement of fur trappers. The first thing they built here were 3 taverns because priorities, right? That settlement eventually grew to become the town of Chicago in the 1830s, and it has not stopped growing since then. We will make 3 passes through this section, so we get to see this park from 3 different perspectives. Up to your right is the brand new shiny glass Salesforce Tower. This one's been open for a few months now, but they just added those chairs downstairs a few weeks ago. We weren't here before that. I still remember when this one was just a hole in the ground. They just go up so fast these days, don't they? Straight ahead of us is another tall glass tower with parabolic arches on the top and the bottom. This one that looks like a large hot pocket. Hot pocket. This is River Point, and it has the arch on the bottom because that section is built over train tracks, and you cannot block the trains with any part of your building, even underground. They had to go around it. It was nice that way. I think better than if they didn't have to do that. A few years ago, they added this red spiral sculpture called Constellation by Santiago Brava, another famous Spanish architect, known for his spiral designs and lofty ambitions. Right, let's continue. So you may have noticed this big wide open bridge in front of us. That is Carroll Avenue Bridge. Carroll Avenue Bridge is always open. It's got train tracks on it, the same train lines that used to run through the two sections of the Wrigley building that we saw in the beginning. And we already know that line does not exist anymore. So this bridge was turned into a heritage site. Now the city maintains it. The city tests it once a year, they close it, drive a public call back, say it's still working, as you get more money for active status, and leave it open. Because if you were to close it, it would come down over there to your right to the street level, it would come down to here. It's a few feet thick. If it were to close, we would not be able to pass through. The city knows it is much more important to have a constant flow of traffic going through here than an old bridge now that no one's using, and that's why it stays open. Up to your left, you will see another tall glass tower called Wolf Point West. Notice that this one has balconies, and some of them have their windows open, and those are features that you will often see in a residential building, but never in an office building. Offices aren't built for your comfort and enjoyment, right? So you get balconies if you live there. That's a one way to tell the difference between buildings that are otherwise just modern and made of glass. You can see its lower floors have their columns showing. Oh my. That is because of a law established in Chicago in 2004 requiring all new buildings to be set back 30 feet or 10 meters from the river so that the public can access the shoreline. Because this is a public river and everyone deserves the right to enjoy it. Now, speaking of which, everybody, eyes up, cameras up, take a look to your left. You will see one of the most beautiful views in the whole city. This gorgeous canyon of buildings around the main branch of the Chicago River. Give you a few moments to just enjoy. Alright, now up to your right, you'll see another tall glass tower that looks completely normal until you see the base. Notice it comes down to a point almost. That base is about as wide as our boat, but the rest of it is much bigger. How does it not just blow over on a windy day? Science. They also have columns inside, like we saw on the other one. These are called caissons. They are made of steel and concrete. They extend to the top, to the bottom, and 120 feet down to the bedrock to hold the building in place. And this building has 12 caissons, and they are 12 feet thick. That's about 4 meters in diameter. That's what you need in a small space to hold this kind of building up to keep it stable. As we pass by it, you'll see also large steel support beams. They extend upwards and outwards to cradle all that weight efficiently. This creates a fun feature. Everybody look up to your right. You'll see the reflection of our boat slowly going by. You might even be able to find yourself if you wave and say hi to me. A fun little cue right there. So this building, 150 North Riverside Plaza, also has 12 giant tanks of thousands of gallons of water up near the top called inertial slosh dampers. And what they do is whenever this tower starts swaying gently in the breeze, like they all do, the water in those tanks will actually slosh back and forth, and that movement will actually help to bring the building back to its center from above as well. To your left, now you will see 3 pointed V-shaped bases, kind of a similar shape as the last one, because it's the same architect. You And down the side of this one, look like waves crashing off to the side. This one, these ridges were designed because they look nice, but they also help to catch and break up wind currents to help reduce sway. And this unique shape allows each floor to have 14 corner offices because everybody that works here is very important, allegedly. Continuing up on the left, you'll see a large throne-shaped Art Deco building. This is the Opera. The Opera House also has offices which they lease out to provide revenue to run the opera as a system. Theater, the opera is behind this big flat space in the middle here. Look carefully in the center of the flat space, you will see the comedy and tragedy faces up there. Below the faces, you can read the name of the building. Let's all read it together. It says, the Civic Opera Pavilion. So that's what happens when you don't have spell check. Now, they did it on purpose. They knew what they were doing. They were going for that classical look. They were thinking classical, like ancient Rome. That's how they wrote their alphabet. Now, the Civic Opera Building opened its doors in the fall of 1929. Who remembers their history books? That was also the stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. And after that was World War II, and after that was recovering from World War II. So that meant that a very long period of time went by in which there was no demand for large, elaborate office buildings in major cities. So there was no slow, gradual evolution of styles during that time. When they did finally start building again, almost 30 years later, in the late 50s, the new style that emerged was completely different than anything anybody had ever seen before. It was just a complete reboot, back to basics. And the new style was called modernism. So you're right. You will see two examples of black box modernism. These are Gateway Centers 1 and 2 by Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill. The father of black box modernism was a German architect named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He always said, less is more. Mies van der Rohe lived through 2 world wars and a depression, and that made him into a very practical man. And so was his style, very practical, just glass and steel, no decorations. But that meant fewer materials, so it was actually cheaper and faster to produce, and that's just what everybody needed after that very long architectural drought. So this style became very popular for many years to come, until people started getting tired of less is more. His rivals started saying, less is a bore, behind his back. They said, let's do something different and exciting and new. How about we make the next one white? So they decorated Gateway Center 3 in white stone and concrete. Baby steps, but the slow, gradual evolution of styles was back. They call this the international style of modernism because this style became popular all around the whole world in the 70s. Everywhere you go, you see a building that looks like this, though it makes it look a little bit generic nowadays. Now, take a look at this little short neighbor here. This little short building has big X's on the outside. X's which are holding up the rooftop from the outside, meaning there are no columns inside. That made it easy to exchange commodities visually. That was the original purpose of this building. Now the purpose of this building is to be a bakery right next door to a gym, which is truly the most difficult life choice of them all. Continuing up on our right is our fourth and final Gateway Center. This one was built in the 80s. You can see them getting creative here. It was the 80s. Notice that the mirrored glass windows actually bubble outward to create a rippling effect as you go by, like the waves of the river. And the building curves inward right here because the river actually curves inward right here. It's like, I'll show you a picture of the curve in the river on a map on the way back up. Now, Gateway Center 4 was also in a major movie called The Dark Knight. in the opening scene of Dark Knight. The Joker's men were positioned up near the top of this building. They shot a